The summary of Thinking, Fast and Slow, brought to you by Click-Through College. Thinking, Fast and Slow is a groundbreaking book by Daniel Kahneman, a Nobel laureate. It shines a light on the two systems that drive our thoughts. System 1, which is quick and intuitive, and System 2, more deliberate and logical. Kahneman explores how these systems shape our judgment, decision-making, and biases. Given the limitations of the platform, I'll provide an extended summary for Part 1 and 2 below. For the remaining parts, you may need to ask separately. Part 1, Two Systems. Part 1 of Thinking, Fast and Slow introduces us to two systems that shape our thoughts and decision-making process. These are known as System 1 and System 2. System 1 is fast, intuitive, and automatic. It requires little energy or attention to function and is often influenced by our inherent biases. This system is in charge when we make quick decisions or react to immediate threats. It's responsible for our gut feelings and first impressions. System 1 operates based on associative memory, connecting different ideas based on experience and context rather than logical analysis. For example, when you read a sad story, you might feel empathetic distress without consciously deciding to do so. That's System 1 at work. On the other hand, System 2 is slow, deliberate, and requires more cognitive effort. It handles complex computations, evaluates choices, and decides what to think about and how to act. For instance, if you're deciding on a career change or solving a challenging puzzle, you're primarily using System 2. It's a system characterized by conscious thought, deliberate decision-making, and exertion of self-control. However, System 2 is lazy and often prefers to accept the suggestions of System 1 without much scrutiny. These systems interact and influence each other. System 1 continuously generates suggestions for System 2 impressions, intuitions, intentions, and feelings. If endorsed by System 2, these suggestions turn into beliefs and voluntary actions. Otherwise, System 2 can actively modify or completely reject the suggestions of System 1. However, System 2 often neglects to monitor System 1, leading to cognitive biases and errors in judgment. By the end of Part 1, it becomes clear that understanding the balance and interaction between these two systems can help us make more informed decisions and recognize when we may be prone to cognitive errors. Part 2, Heuristics and Biases. Part 2 delves into the heuristics and biases arising from our System 1 thinking, influencing our judgment and decision-making. Kahneman discusses the law of small numbers, which is our tendency to draw conclusions from small sample sizes. We often generalize from limited data, assuming that small samples are as representative as large ones, leading to erroneous conclusions. This is a result of our excessive faith in what we believe we know, and it's seen as a bias in itself. The anchoring effect is another bias presented in this part. We tend to rely heavily on the first piece of information, the anchor, when making decisions. For example, the initial price of a product often serves as an anchor and influences how reasonable any subsequent prices seem. The availability heuristic is a mental shortcut that uses immediate examples that come readily to mind when evaluating a specific topic, concept, method, or decision. This heuristic can lead to errors in judgment if the readily available examples aren't truly representative. Part 2 also introduces the concept of representativeness heuristic, where we judge the probability of an event based on its similarity to our stereotypes of similar events. While this heuristic simplifies complex judgments, it often leads to severe misjudgments. One of the most powerful biases Kahneman discusses is the confirmation bias. This is our tendency to search for, interpret, focus on and remember information in a way that confirms our preconceptions. It's a System 1 bias that makes us overvalue data that supports our beliefs and undervalue or ignore data that contradicts them. Part 3, Overconfidence. Part 3 focuses on the theme of overconfidence and how it affects our decision-making and judgment. The overconfidence effect is a cognitive bias that causes an individual to overestimate their accuracy in their judgments and predictions. We are prone to be overly optimistic about our abilities and the outcome of our plans while downplaying potential risks. Kahneman discusses the illusion of validity, our tendency to believe our judgments and predictions are more accurate than they truly are, even in the face of evidence showing the inaccuracy of our predictions. We continue to make predictions and form judgments, confident in their validity despite our poor track record. This overconfidence also extends to expert intuition. Kahneman argues that while intuition can sometimes seem surprisingly accurate, it's only reliable in environments that are sufficiently regular to be predictable and provide ample opportunities for learning. Unfortunately, many environments, especially those involving financial or strategic decisions, don't meet these criteria. Nonetheless, we often hold an illusion of skill, overestimating our abilities and underestimating the role of chance. Kahneman also explores the concept of hindsight bias, our tendency to see past events as more predictable than they were at the time. This bias makes us overconfident about the accuracy of our predictions about the future. It can lead us to overestimate how much we could have predicted an outcome, given the information available at the time. By the end of Part 3, Kahneman makes clear that overconfidence is perhaps the most significant obstacle to our ability to make rational decisions and judgments. It's a bias deeply rooted in our thinking, affecting the very core of our decision-making processes. Part 4, Choices. Part 4 of Thinking, Fast and Slow is dedicated to exploring the notion of choices and decision-making under uncertainty. Kahneman presents his groundbreaking work, Prospect Theory, which he developed with Amos Tversky. The theory demonstrates that people make decisions based on the potential value of losses and gains, not the final outcome. Prospect theory suggests that people derive satisfaction or unhappiness from gains and losses rather than their state of wealth. It proposes that people are loss-averse. Losses loom larger than corresponding gains. For example, the dissatisfaction one gets from losing a sum of money is generally greater than the satisfaction received from winning the same amount. A fundamental concept introduced here is the reference point. Every decision we make involves gains and losses, and we evaluate these relative to a specific reference point, usually the status quo. Deviations from the reference point are perceived as either a loss or gain, influencing our decision-making process. Kahneman also discusses endowment effect, a cognitive bias that causes people to overvalue what they own regardless of its objective market value. It's connected to loss aversion, where giving up an object is considered a loss, which is overvalued compared to acquiring the same object. Additionally, he explores the concept of framing and how the way a choice is framed can significantly impact decisions. The same situation can be perceived differently, leading to different choices, depending on whether it's presented in terms of potential gains or losses. This section of the book highlights how our decisions are rarely as rational as we believe them to be, heavily influenced by potential gains and losses, framing effects, and reference points. Understanding these factors can help us make more informed decisions. Part 5, Two Selves. In Part 5 of Thinking, Fast and Slow, Kahneman explores another dichotomy within our minds: the distinction between the experiencing self and the remembering self. The experiencing self is the you that exists in the present moment. This self lives in the here and now, experiencing joy, sorrow, anger, boredom, and other emotions. The experiencing self is in the moment, feeling pain or pleasure and responding to the world as it happens. On the other hand, the remembering self is the you that maintains the ongoing story of your life. It's this self that looks back on past experiences and plans for the future. The remembering self is the one that answers when you are asked about the overall quality of your life or how happy you are. Kahneman explains that these two selves perceive happiness differently. The experiencing self might find joy in the moment-to-moment activities, enjoying a cup of coffee, taking a walk in the park, or laughing at a joke. In contrast, the remembering self evaluates happiness by looking back at these experiences, often focusing on peak moments, either good or bad, and the end of the experience. This distinction leads to the peak-end rule, which states that our memory of past experiences doesn't represent an average level of happiness or pain but is determined mostly by how intense the peak level of happiness or pain was and how it ended. Kahneman also discusses the duration neglect and focusing illusion. Duration neglect is the relative disregard of the duration of an episode in determining its remembered utility. An event that lasted longer but was less intense could be remembered as less joyful or painful than a short but more intense event. The focusing illusion refers to the tendency to place too much importance on one aspect of an event, causing an overestimation of its impact. Lastly, Kahneman delves into the idea of choice blindness. Even when we make choices, we often remain blind to the influences that shape those choices, attributing them to rational decision-making processes instead of recognizing the impact of cognitive biases. By the end of Part 5, it's clear that our perceptions of our lives, decisions, and happiness are far more complex than we usually appreciate. Understanding the differences between the experiencing and remembering selves can help us lead lives that satisfy both and make decisions that genuinely contribute to our overall well-being. The summary of Thinking, Fast and Slow.